By the time Ezekiel understood what that small growl really meant, it was already too late. It hit him from behind. No warning. No footsteps he could place. Just sound. Low. Shaky. Vibrating with effort, like a chest too small trying to push out something it hadn't earned yet. Ezekiel went still. Not the kind of still that comes from fear. The kind that comes from listening. From a man who had spent years building the whole world out of nothing but what he could hear. The growl stretched. Then cracked. Then died. Silence swallowed it whole. Ezekiel's fingers, resting flat on the wooden table in front of him, didn't move. His breathing stayed even. His chin dropped just slightly, the way it did when he was thinking harder than anyone else in the room could see. That wasn't right. A real predator doesn't break its own sound. It doesn't lose the note halfway through. It doesn't end on something that feels like embarrassment. The floor creaked. Close. 3 feet. Maybe 2. Hi viewers, have you ever heard someone try to be brave when they clearly weren't ready yet? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever felt that way too. The thing moved again. Slow. Unsteady. Like it wasn't sure what to do with its own weight. Ezekiel tilted his head. That was your best one. Nothing answered. Then, another growl. Harder this time. Sharper. Built from something closer to determination than actual threat. It was almost convincing. Almost. He exhaled slowly through his nose. His hand dropped from the table. He turned, not rushing, not stumbling, just turning the way a man turns when he already knows the shape of his space by heart. The rough wool of his shirt caught the draft from the cracked window. The fire behind him breathed against the back of his neck. Warm. Steady. His. He crouched low. You practicing? He asked quietly. The growl came back. Shorter. A little higher pitched. Defensive. What unsettled him wasn't danger. It was hesitation. Real danger never hesitated. Ezekiel sat on the floor, slow and deliberate, knees folding under him. He rested his palms flat on the rough wooden planks. Just waited. The fire popped. Wind pressed against the shutters. Somewhere outside, the night bugs started up their noise again, which meant whatever this was hadn't scared them off. Hadn't scattered anything wild. That told him everything. The breathing across from him was small. Uneven. Carrying more effort than size should allow. He waited 2 full minutes. Then wait. A paw. Barely heavy. Landing on his left knee like a question mark. Ezekiel didn't react. Didn't pull back. Didn't even let his shoulders change. He just breathed. The weight shifted. Grew slightly. Something climbed, slow, careful, deeply uncertain, from his knee to his thigh, then up his side until it settled with full, warm pressure against the back of his neck and across his shoulder blades. Tiny claws. Fur so soft it almost didn't register. A heartbeat, rapid, scared, pretending to be fine. He felt it. Through the fabric. Through skin. That small, hammering pulse of something alive and terrified and trying very hard not to show it. Ezekiel smiled. Just slightly. Just one corner of his mouth. There you go, he whispered. And the cub. Because that's what it was, not a ghost, not a predator, not the thing the villagers had been warning each other about in hushed, frightened voices for the past 3 days. The cub exhaled. Warm breath against the side of his neck. And for a moment, the whole cottage just settled. Everything quiet. Everything still. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because an hour later, Just as the fire dropped to low orange coals and the cub's breathing smoothed into something close to sleep, it growled again. No crack this time. No hesitation. Deep. Directed. At the door. Ezekiel's smile disappeared. He turned his face slowly toward the dark that his eyes had never known. And he listened. Something was on the other side of that door. And it wasn't practicing anything. The cub moved before Ezekiel could. 1 second it was warm and slack across his back. The next, every muscle locked. The shift was immediate, like flipping a switch from sleep to alarm. Small claws tightened against his shoulder. Not playful. Not the casual grip from before. This was something trying to hold on and stay low at the same time. Ezekiel reached back. Slow. Found warm fur. Pressed once, stay. The cub didn't growl again. It just breathed fast and shallow through its nose. That alone told him more than a sound could. He rose to his feet without a word. The fire had burned down to almost nothing. The room had cooled. He crossed to the door by memory, 7 steps, 2 slightly right to avoid the low stool, and pressed 2 fingers to the wood. Vibration. Faint. Footsteps on the path outside. More than one person. Moving past, not stopping. He waited until he couldn't feel them anymore. Then stepped back. Let out a slow breath. The cub made a small sound. Tight. Unhappy. I know, Ezekiel said quietly. He moved to the shuttered window and cracked it open, just a finger's width. Let the night air in. Listen past the trees, past the road, all the way to the far end of the village where he could just barely hear voices traveling on the wind. Took 3 of Marin's hens. Tracks too small for a wolf, but young but unstable, that's what Odysseus said. He closed the shutter. Turned back into the room. The cub had climbed off his back at some point, and was now sitting on the floor near his feet. He could tell by the weight of the silence, one body taking up space nearby, breathing, waiting. He crouched down again. They're talking about you, he said. The cub pawed his knee. Once. A light tap, like punctuation. I didn't report you. He reached forward until his fingers found the top of its head. Not going to. A growl built in response. Not the shaky one from earlier. This one had confidence. It had edges. It lasted a full second before it dropped off. That was better, Ezekiel said. The cub growled again, immediately, like it was agreeing with its own performance. He laughed. Quiet, under his breath. The kind of laugh a man only allows himself when no one else is listening. He didn't ask where it came from. Didn't try to understand what it was doing alone this far from wherever it should have been. That wasn't his job tonight. Tonight he just fed it. Whatever scraps he had, a strip of dried meat, the heel of bread from that morning, a piece of salted root he hadn't touched, he set them on the floor. The cub ate without hesitation. Quick. Hungry in a way that made something in Ezekiel's chest pull uncomfortably tight. He sat with his back against the wall while it ate. Thought about the word. Unstable. Thought about how many things got called that simply because they were scared. The fire finished dying. The room went cold. And the cub, full now, climbed back up, not onto his shoulder this time but across his lap. Settled there like it had already decided this was permanent. Ezekiel let it. He folded his arms loosely around it. Let his head fall back against the wall. For a long while, he just listened to the quiet. The trees shifting outside. The distant creak of the mill. The slow, even breathing of something small that had chosen to trust him without a reason. He wasn't sure how long it had been before it happened. But at some point deep in the night, the cub's breathing changed. Not waking up. Not alarmed. Asleep. Fully. Completely. And in its sleep it growled. Low. Steady. Nothing shaky about it. Ezekiel's arms went still. That was different. That wasn't practice. That was memory. The days that followed had a shape. Ezekiel would rise before the light changed the temperature of the room. He could feel dawn. Not see it, but feel it in the way the air thinned slightly, the way the birds outside began to layer in from the far tree line to the close one, building their noise the way someone stacks kindling. He would start the fire. Fill the pot. Move through the cottage in the particular silence of a man who had long since made peace with doing things alone. But now there was another sound. Claws on wood. Following him. The cub didn't rush ahead. It didn't hang back either. It just mirrored him. Matched his pace without being asked. Stopped when he stopped. Waited when he waited. Like it was learning something from the spaces between his steps. Some mornings it would sit directly behind him while he cooked. He could feel its attention. That particular quality of stillness that meant watching. One morning he set a wooden spoon on the floor, just to see what would happen. The cub picked it up. Held it. Then set it back down in almost the exact spot. Ezekiel didn't say anything. But he filed that away. It was quick. Quicker than it should have been for something that size. During the days, it would practice its growl. He'd be mending something or sorting dry goods at the shelf, and out of nowhere, it would try one. Short. Controlled. Still not fully there, but closer. And after each attempt, it would pause, waiting. Like it wanted a response. He gave it one. Two rushed. Growl. Better. Growl. You're pushing from your throat. Push from lower. A pause. Then a growl that started differently. Deeper. It shook the air a little. Ezekiel turned toward the sound. There. The cub made a noise he could only describe as satisfied. Some bonds aren't built on understanding. They're built on recognition. Two things that have been alone long enough to know, without explanation, that the other one gets it. Ezekiel wasn't lonely. He'd corrected people on that his whole life. He just lived with a lot of quiet. There was a difference. Loneliness reached outward, aching for something it couldn't name. What he had was different. It was just space. Room. A life built for one, functioning exactly as designed. But this was different. This was something choosing to stay. By the end of the first week, the cub had taken to sleeping pressed against his side rather than across his lap. A small shift. But deliberate. Closer. More anchored. By the second week, it had started positioning itself between him and the door every time he sat near the window. He noticed. Said nothing. Let it happen. One evening, while the wind picked up and the light outside changed the way it does before rain, Ezekiel sat quietly near the dying fire. The cub was behind him, not on him, not touching, just positioned. He could feel it from 3 feet away. Coiled. Present. Alert. And then, before he heard anything, the cub growled. Not practice. Not the trying to be fierce sound he'd come to recognize. This was different in the way a stretched wire is different from a loose one. Tight. Ready. Directed. Toward the window. Ezekiel's head came up slowly. He listened. Wind. Rain starting. Branches. The road. Footsteps. Distant. But deliberate. Not a villager wandering home. Not someone running from the rain. Someone moving like they already knew where they were going. The cub didn't stop growling. And whatever was out there, whatever Ezekiel couldn't hear yet, the cub had already been tracking it for longer than he realized. He came into the village like bad weather. Quiet first. Then everywhere. His name reached Ezekiel before he did. Kaler Vire. Ezekiel heard it the way he heard most things he wasn't supposed to know, through walls, carried on low voices that forgot sound travels when someone can't see them watching. Asking about livestock, but that's not what he wants. Came in with 3 others. Didn't raise his voice once. Didn't have to. The enforcer who didn't need to raise his voice. That told Ezekiel more than any description. Inside the cottage, the cub had changed. Not dramatically. No obvious sign. But the small things, the things Ezekiel tracked instead of color and light, those had shifted. It no longer padded behind him to the kitchen. It sat near the door. It didn't practice its growl in the mornings. It just waited. Still. Watching something only it could track. Ezekiel noticed the silence more than he would have noticed noise. He went about his day. Kept the shutters mostly closed. Didn't go into the village. Early afternoon, the cub made a sound he hadn't heard before. Not a growl. Not a snarl. Just a low, steady vibration in its chest. Barely audible. The kind of sound a thing makes when it's trying to disappear but doesn't quite know how. Ezekiel went still. He counted. Footsteps on the path outside. 1 pair. Unhurried. Stopping. The cub went completely silent. That was worse. A knock would have been manageable. Something he could prepare for, position himself against. But the knock didn't come. Just standing. Just presence. On the other side of 3 inches of old wood, someone stood and didn't announce himself, and didn't leave. Ezekiel waited. 1 breath. 2. He thought about what kind of man stands at a stranger's door without knocking. A man who isn't asking permission. A man who's deciding whether he needs to bother with the door at all. Ezekiel straightened his spine. Turned to face the door from across the room. I know you're there, he said. Even. No performance in it. Silence. Then footsteps moving away from the door, back down the path. Slow. No rush. The walk of someone who wasn't leaving because he'd been told to. Just choosing to move for now. Like he'd already seen what he came to see. The cub exhaled behind Ezekiel. Short. Tight. He didn't reach for it. Didn't comfort it. He just stayed where he was, facing the door, listening to those footsteps until they were entirely gone. Then he turned. He'll come back. The cub's response wasn't a growl. It was quieter than that. A small, low sound, barely formed. More honest than anything it had produced during all those mornings of practice. Ezekiel crossed the room. Sat down. Let the cub press against his side. He thought about what the villagers had said. Something being tracked. Something valuable. Not an animal, the word they'd used was asset. He hadn't understood that then. He was starting to now. This wasn't a lost cub. This was a cub someone lost on purpose, or was very angry about losing. And the man at the door wasn't looking for livestock. He was looking for this. Ezekiel sat with that thought in the dark and the quiet for a long time. The cub's heartbeat hammered fast against his ribs. Fast and small and absolutely terrified. And that night, before the fire completely died, boots on the path again. But this time, more than 1 pair. The door opened. Not kicked. Not shoved. Just opened. The way someone opens a door when they already own everything on the other side of it. Ezekiel didn't move from his seat. He heard 3 sets of boots stop at the threshold. 2 stayed outside. 1 came in. Soft steps. Deliberate placement. Someone who was comfortable in rooms that weren't his. The fire had been rebuilt. Ezekiel had made sure of that. Warm. Well lit, he assumed. He wanted no tactical advantage given by shadow or confusion. You live alone? The voice was low. Not unfriendly. The kind of unfriendly that disguises itself as polite. Mostly, Ezekiel said. He didn't look up. He was sitting at the table, both hands visible, a cup between them. He heard the man pause. Take in the room. Move slightly right then left. Cataloging. I'm asking questions through the village, the man said. About something lost. A lot of things get lost around here. This particular thing, Kayla said, tends to leave marks when it's been somewhere. He was moving as he talked. Slow circuit of the room. Not aggressive, controlled. Ezekiel tracked him by the sound of each step, by the way the air in the room shifted as his body displaced it. Near the shelf. Near the window. Pausing near the far wall. What kind of marks? Ezekiel asked. Claw marks. Mostly. The cub was behind the supply chest near the back wall. Ezekiel knew exactly where. He'd told it, not in words, but with 2 taps on the wood that morning, and a long pause until it went and stayed there. He wasn't sure it would hold. It had held for 4 hours so far. I don't have livestock, Ezekiel said. So whatever's been out in those fields, it hasn't come through here. I didn't say it was after livestock. Kayla stopped moving. The room went a different kind of quiet. The kind that has weight. You're blind, Kayla said. Not cruel. Observational. Like a fact he was filing away. Since I was 4, Ezekiel answered. And you manage alone. People manage what they have to. A beat. That's true, Kayla said. He was close now. Ezekiel didn't know exactly where. The man moved too smoothly, distributed his weight too evenly. But close. The warmth of another body in the air. The faint trace of something cold, metal, leather, something else he couldn't name. What hurt most wasn't being questioned. It was being seen too clearly by someone looking for something to use. You've been in this cottage for a while, Kayla said. It wasn't a question. Long enough to know every board by sound. Then you'd notice if something had been living here with you. Ezekiel looked up. Not at a face, he didn't have that. But he tilted his chin toward where the voice was, direct and unhesitating. I'd notice, he said. I notice everything. Another beat. Longer this time. And then Ezekiel heard it. Behind the supply chest, just barely, a breath. The cub's shifting weight. One tiny claw against the floor. 1 fraction of a second. Almost nothing. But Kayla's silence changed. Not a sound from him. Not a movement. But the air in the room tightened in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. He'd heard it too. Or not heard it. Felt it. The way certain people feel the presence of things others miss, trained to it, sharpened by years of hunting exactly this. Ezekiel's hands pressed flat against the table. I think we're done, he said. Kayla didn't answer right away. The silence stretched for full seconds. 5. Then footsteps, back toward the door. Even. Unhurried. The walk of a man who had already found what he came to find and was just choosing the right moment to act on it. He stopped at the threshold. If you're keeping something, he said, and his voice had changed, just slightly, the thin layer of politeness pulled back by one thread. Understand what that decision costs. The door closed. The two pairs of boots outside moved away. Ezekiel sat completely still for one full minute. Then he exhaled. He knows, he said. The cub pushed the chest aside and came to him immediately. Climbed up. Pressed against his chest so hard it almost knocked him backward. Heartbeat hammering. Ezekiel wrapped both arms around it. Tight. He knows, he said again, quieter. And he's not leaving. That night, long after the cub had finally fallen into an exhausted, restless sleep against his side, distant sounds rolled in from the far edge of the village. Not weather. Not animals. Screaming. And then silence. And that silence was so total, so wrong, so different from every other quiet Ezekiel had known in this cottage, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a warning. The screaming had stopped. That was the part that stayed with Ezekiel through the night. Not the sound itself, the absence after it. The way the village went so quiet that even the insects pulled back, like the dark had swallowed everything and wasn't done yet. He didn't sleep. The cub didn't either. They stayed like that until the first birds came back, cautious, sparse, and the air thinned into early morning. Only then did Ezekiel allow himself to move. He built the fire slow, methodical. Every familiar motion a way of steadying something inside him that wanted to come apart. The cub watched from the floor. Close. Not on him, just near. Like it was giving him space but refusing to leave it entirely. He set a bowl down without being asked. It didn't eat right away. That was new. Ezekiel sat across from it and thought about that. An animal that's hungry will always eat first. Unless something is more pressing than hunger. Unless the body is already running on something else. Dread. That's what it was. He recognized it. Had warned it himself, years back, when the world had made clear what it thought of a blind Omega living alone at the edge of everything. You already know what's coming, he said quietly. The cub looked at him. He couldn't see it, but he felt the shift in attention. The way the air changed when something focuses entirely on you. Then it stood. Crossed to him. Climbed up slow, not rushing. And pressed its face against the side of his neck. Just that. No growl. No performance. Just contact. Ezekiel closed his eyes, not that it changed anything, and held it. Some things don't need words. Some things have already said everything just by staying. He had spent most of his life learning not to need. Not to reach. Not to let anything settle so deep it could take something with it when it left. He hadn't meant to let this happen. But it had happened. And now, whatever came through that door next, it wouldn't be just him on the other side of it. He spent the afternoon different than before. More deliberate. He moved things. Quietly. Small shifts, the low stool angled differently, the rug pulled back from the center of the floor. The supply chest shifted 6 inches left. He ran his hands along the walls, relearning every notch, every soft spot in the wood, every place where the frame gave slightly under pressure. The cub followed his every move. Watched everything. At one point Ezekiel stopped near the center of the room and crouched down. He put both hands flat on the floor. Breathed. Then he spoke. I need you to do something. His voice was low. Steady. When the time comes, and it's coming tonight, whatever you hear me say, you stay behind me. You don't move first. You understand? Silence. Then the cub walked forward. Pressed its forehead to his palm. He exhaled. Okay. Evening came. The temperature dropped. The village sounds, what little had returned during the day, faded back into nothing before dark had fully settled. And then, the fire. Ezekiel smelled it first. Faint. Coming from the east end of the village. Wood burning, too hot, too fast for a hearth. Then voices. Running feet. Scattered. Then nothing again. The cub stood at the door. Its growl started low in its chest, not the practice version, not the working up to it version. This was the one that had no performance in it at all. The real one. The one Ezekiel had heard only in its sleep. He stood behind it. Placed one hand on its back. The growl didn't stop. It grew. And for the first time, it didn't sound like fear pretending. It sounded like something that had finally decided. Boots on the path. Coming fast. Not one pair. Not three. More. They didn't come to the door first. They circled. Ezekiel tracked them by sound. 4 sets of feet, maybe 5, moving through the brush on both sides of the cottage. Deliberate. Practiced. The kind of sweep you do when you're not planning to negotiate. He stood in the center of the room. The cub was pressed against his left leg, growling so low it was almost below hearing. More vibration than sound. A frequency that moved through the floor. One of the men outside spoke. Not to Ezekiel. To someone else. East side clear. West clear. Then Kayla's voice. From the path directly out front. Calm. Like he was reporting weather. It's here. I can feel it. The cub went silent. That total, locked silence. Ezekiel placed his hand on its back, don't, and felt every muscle underneath go rigid. A knock this time. 3. Measured. Ezekiel. Kayla's voice through the door. Open it. This ends easier that way. Ezekiel didn't move toward the door. He moved toward the window. Fingers on the shutter, not opening, just reading. The latch was solid. The frame was old but thick. Bought maybe 2 minutes if it came to that. I know you can hear me, Kayla said. No louder than before. I also know you're not foolish. Blind doesn't mean unaware. You've been tracking me since I first came to this village. True. And you know what I came for? Also true. What you don't know, Kayla said, and his voice shifted, not softer, but closer, like he'd stepped right up to the wood. Is what it is. Ezekiel turned back toward the door. Then tell me, he said. A pause. Open the door. Tell me first. Another pause. Longer. The cub you've been keeping, Kayla said, is the last living heir of the Voss bloodline. A line my employer has been removing for 11 years. It wasn't supposed to survive. It was supposed to be eliminated before it reached maturity. The cub pressed harder against Ezekiel's leg. It reached maturity, Ezekiel said. Not yet, Kayla answered. Close. That's why I'm here. Before it does. Silence. Ezekiel thought about that word. Removing. 11 years. The way a man uses clean language for dirty things when he's been doing them long enough that the original weight has worn off. He thought about the cub. The shaky growl in the dark. The warm weight across his shoulders. The way it had learned to press its forehead to his hand when words weren't the right tool. He thought about the word heir. Not astray. Never astray. You knew, he said. Not to Kayla. Just out loud. To the room. To the cub against his leg. The cub made a small, low sound. Not denial. Not explanation. Just present. Still here. Still choosing this. Ezekiel. Kayla's voice dropped. The first real edge in it. I have 6 men outside. You have no exits I haven't covered. And I have no interest in harming you. Step aside. Let me finish what I was sent to do. You walk away from this untouched. Ezekiel was quiet for a long time. He thought about every version of himself that had ever been told to step aside. To not make things harder. To accept what couldn't be changed. Every time the world had looked at him, blind, omega, alone, and decided he wasn't worth the obstacle. He had stepped aside before. Every single time. No, he said. The word landed like a stone. Flat. Final. No anger in it. No performance. Just a man who had run out of reasons to move. On the other side of the door, Kayla went very still. The men outside shifted. And then, from the village, distant but closing, the sound of more boots on the main road. Kayla's men weren't the only ones moving tonight. The door came open. Not kicked, pushed. Steady pressure, the latch giving with a dry snap, wood swinging wide. Cold air hit the room. Kayla stepped in. He didn't rush. He moved the way a man moves when he's already calculated every variable and found nothing that concerns him. 2 of his men filed in behind, stopping on either side of the frame. Ezekiel stood in the center of the room. The cub was in front of him. Not beside. Not behind. In front. Kayla looked at it. Ezekiel couldn't see the look, but he felt the shift in the room. The way attention lands on something and changes the air around it. Move the animal, Kayla said. No, Ezekiel said. I'm not asking you. I know. Kayla took 1 step forward. The cub's growl filled the room. Not the old one. Not the one that cracked and tried and fell short. This one had walls. It had depth. It shook the space between them and held there, steady, warning, real. One of the men at the door shifted. Kayla raised one hand, stop, without looking back. He studied the cub. Ezekiel tracked everything he could. Kayla's breathing. His footstep weight. The position of the 2 men at the door. The third somewhere behind the cottage, boots faint through the back wall. It's grown since the reports, Kayla said. Quiet. Almost to himself. Things do that, Ezekiel said. When they're cared for. A beat. You had no idea what you were taking in. Didn't matter. It matters now. Does it? Ezekiel kept his voice level. You already decided before you walked in. Whatever I say doesn't change what you came here to do. Kayla was quiet. Then why are we still talking? Ezekiel said. Something moved in the silence. Hard to name. Like a man who has done this kind of work long enough to be efficient at it, reaching, briefly, for something he left behind a long time ago. It didn't last. Step aside, Ezekiel. No. Kayla moved. 2 steps, fast, direct, not toward Ezekiel, toward the cub. The cub didn't wait. It lunged. Not with skill. Not with training or precision or any of the calculated force of something that had been taught to fight. It moved the way a thing moves when it has decided that the space between itself and danger is no longer acceptable. Pure. Forward. Brave in the specific way that has nothing to do with being ready. Ezekiel heard the impact. The scramble. Kayla's sharp breath, surprised. One of the men at the door stepping forward. Hold, Kayla said. The cub had latched onto his forearm. Small. Fierce. Shaking with the effort of holding. Kayla looked down at it. For 1 full second, no one moved. It wasn't ready. Anyone could see that. The grip was desperate. The size was wrong. The odds were wrong. Everything was wrong. But it had chosen to be brave anyway. That matters. Kaler pulled his arm back. The cub came with it, didn't let go, feet dragging. Ezekiel moved. Don't! Steel flashed. He heard it before he understood it. The sound of metal pulled fast from leather. A decision made in under a second by a man who had made it 100 times before and stopped thinking about it. The cub made a sound. One. Short. Ezekiel stopped moving. The room stopped. The sound the cub made was nothing like a growl. Nothing like practice. Nothing like brave. It was just small. Honest. The sound of something that had tried its absolute hardest and reached the end of what trying could do. Then the floor. Then silence. Kaler stood still. His breathing had changed. Not guilt, not yet. Just the interruption of a man who has run a clean calculation for years and felt, for the first time, a variable he hadn't entered. He looked down. And something in his face, Ezekiel couldn't see it, but he heard it in the quality of the silence that followed, the way a man's stillness changes when what he's done finally registers, shifted. It was the last one of his men said from the door. Low. Almost careful. Kaler didn't respond. Ezekiel was on his knees. He hadn't decided to go down. His legs had just gone. Both hands on the floor. Head down. No sound from him. Nothing. Just the particular silence of a man who has lost the one thing he didn't know he needed until it was already gone. Kaler left without a word. His men followed. The door didn't close all the way behind them. It hung open, letting in the cold, and Ezekiel didn't move to shut it. He stayed on the floor. One hand flat on the wood. The other resting over the small, still weight beside him. The fire behind him had burned to almost nothing. He didn't rebuild it. The cold came in slow from the open door, and he let it. He just sat there in the dark that was the only dark he'd ever known and breathed. There was no crying. He wasn't built for crying. What he had instead was a specific kind of stillness, the kind that comes after something has been removed from the world so fast that the space it left hasn't caught up yet. Like a tooth pulled clean. The ache arrives later. First there is just absence. Exact. Precise. He stayed on that floor a long time. Long enough for the birds to stop. Long enough for true dark to come. Long enough for the fire to die completely, and the room to go cold all the way through. At some point he became aware of voices outside. Far. Moving past. The village putting itself back together the way villages do. Cautiously confused, not fully understanding what had just moved through them. He heard someone stop at the path outside. Footsteps. One pair. Hesitant. Ezekiel? A man's voice. Adissa, the miller, who had warned him 3 weeks ago about the outer woods. You all right in there? Ezekiel didn't answer. Adissa waited. Then moved on. That was right. There was nothing to say yet. Nothing that would land correctly. Some things have to be carried alone until they find their shape. Days passed. He wasn't sure how many. He ate. Drank water. Kept the fire going because freezing was not something he had permission to do. Moved through the cottage with the same route, the same steps, the same careful navigation of every corner he had memorized. But the sounds were wrong now. No claws on wood. No breath by the door. No weight settling against his side in the dark. The silence was the same silence as before. But before, it had been his. Built. Chosen. Comfortable. This silence had a shape of something missing in it. He noticed it most in the mornings. That moment before full awareness, before the body remembers, when he'd feel the fire, hear the birds, and his hands would start to reach. And then remember. And stop. On the 5th day, someone left food at the door. No knock. Just the sound of something being set down carefully, and feet retreating fast. Adissa, probably. Ezekiel left it outside for an hour. Then brought it in and ate it. Not because he was hungry. Because someone had thought to reach, and ignoring it felt like the wrong response to that. He was sitting by the dead fire that evening when the knock came. Not hesitant this time. 3 deliberate strikes. He knew it before the door opened. He'd know that particular rhythm anywhere now. You came back, Ezekiel said. Kayla stepped inside. He didn't say anything at first. Ezekiel heard him stop near the center of the room. Just standing. Not cataloging this time. Not sweeping. Just standing. I received a report, Kayla said finally. His voice was different. Not soft. Not broken. Just stripped of something. Like a surface that used to have a coat of something over it, and didn't anymore. The cub, he said. It wasn't just a remaining heir. Ezekiel waited. The Voss line carries something. A specific marker in their bloodline, something my employer's researchers had been trying to locate for 20 years. Kaler paused. Not to destroy it. To use it, Ezekiel said. Yes. And now it's gone. Now it's gone. Silence. The last one, Kayla said. Not explaining. Not defending. Just saying it out loud like a man who needs to hear the weight of a thing in his own voice before he can carry it right. It wasn't dangerous, Ezekiel said. No. It was never dangerous. No. It was just trying to figure out how to be brave. Kayla didn't respond to that. But the silence that followed was the longest one yet. And it was not a cold silence. It was the kind of silence that sits in a man's chest and refuses to leave clean. Why did you come back? Ezekiel asked. Another pause. I don't know, Kayla said. And for the first time, that was the truest thing either of them had said to each other. The report reached Kayla's employer 6 days later. 3 pages. Clipped language. The kind of writing that had been trained to remove feeling from fact, to make decisions sound like weather, inevitable, impersonal, already over. Page 1, confirmation of termination. Page 2, location, timeline, method. Page 3, a note from the research division. Kayla read the 3rd page twice. Then set it down. The cub, the one he'd been tracking for 4 months across 2 territories, had not simply been the last of its bloodline. It had been the only one that carried the marker in its complete form. The others, the ones eliminated across 11 years of careful, efficient work, had carried fragments. Partial sequences. Useful, but incomplete. This one, this specific one, had been the whole thing. Irreplaceable. Those were the exact words in the report. Irreplaceable. No synthetic equivalent. No secondary source. The line, the marker, the 11 years of removal. All of it had been building toward this one, and the plan had been to take it alive. To extract what was needed. To finally close the gap that had kept the research stalled for 2 decades. The order to terminate had been a mistake. His mistake. He had moved on instinct. On 11 years of training that said, locate, assess, remove. He had not waited for updated orders. Had not confirmed the directive had changed. Had walked into that cottage with the full weight of everything he knew and acted like certainty. He put the report in the drawer. Stood at the window of the cold office for a long time. He thought about the cottage. The fire built deliberately for a man with no sight who still understood light well enough to know it mattered. The hands flat on the floor. The way Ezekiel had gone to his knees without a sound, not performance, not surrender, just a man collapsing under something real. He thought about the cub. That last sound. It had not growled. It had not snarled or lunged or fought the way something trained for survival fights. It had made the smallest sound possible. The truest one. The one that had no strategy in it at all. He had heard it in the moment, and filed it away. It was louder now. He did not go back to the cottage that week. He told himself there was no reason to. The assignment was closed. The error was logged. His employer had moved on with the specific cruelty of people who measure loss in resources rather than in weight. He did not tell himself it was fine. He did not tell himself it was just an assignment. He was past that kind of lie. 3 weeks later, a single package arrived at his office. No return mark. A small box wrapped in rough cloth. Inside, a carved wooden object. Rough-edged. Imprecise. The shape of something small and four-legged, barely recognizable, done by a man who worked entirely by touch. No note. Kayla held it for a long time. He thought about a blind man alone in a cold cottage, hands moving over wood in the dark, making something that served no purpose except to say, "I remember." He set it on the windowsill. Left it there. Elsewhere, in that cottage at the edge of the village, Ezekiel sat by the fire. The silence was still wrong. Still carried the shape of something missing. He doubted that would change. Some absences don't fill. They just become part of the room. Part of the routine. Part of the way the morning sounds when you reach without thinking and remember without warning. But he had learned something. He had spent years building a world so exactly fitted to himself that nothing could disrupt it. No surprise. No variable. No weight that wasn't his own. And then something small and scared and absolutely convinced it needed to sound dangerous had climbed onto his back and changed every single thing about the shape of that world. He hadn't asked for it. Hadn't needed it. Hadn't been looking. But it had found him anyway. And it had been brave, not the kind that wins, not the kind that survives, but the kind that shows up. The kind that steps forward when stepping forward is the wrong odds and the wrong size and the wrong everything. That kind of brave doesn't need to win to matter. He sat with that. Let it settle. And somewhere in the quiet, under the fire's low sound, under the wind in the trees, under all the ordinary noise of a life continuing past the thing that broke it, something that had been pulled very tight in his chest finally, slowly, loosened. Not healed. Not gone. Just acknowledged. He exhaled. And the cottage held him the way it always had. Steady. Quiet. His. But different now. Changed in the specific, permanent way that only happens when something real has passed through. The cruelest mistake isn't violence. It's not understanding what you're destroying until there's nothing left to understand. It wasn't trying to be dangerous. It was trying to be brave. That's the end of Ezekiel's story. And if it stayed with you, if that cub's courage, and that one word no, and the weight of what gets destroyed before it's understood, if any of that landed somewhere real in you, you're not alone in that. Subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every story on this channel is built to do exactly what this one did, to move something, to make you feel it, and to give you a reason to come back. Drop a comment below. Tell us what hit you hardest. Your words don't just reach us. They reach every person who reads that comment section and needs to know someone else felt it too. That's how stories survive. Not just by being told, but by being passed on.